Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for coming. My name is Eric Bates, and it's my pleasure to be hosting the final of our series of Delacorte lectures on magazine journalism. We've been doing this all semester and having really a chance to explore the art and craft of magazines, how they're made, why they're made, whether they're going to ever exist again, all of the big questions. And I'm really pleased tonight to be able to introduce Sid Evans, the editor-in-chief of Southern Living and some of the other magazines with Time Inc. associated with Southern Living. Sid is a bit of an outlier in our series in a way that's really great and really interesting. Inherently, a lot of the lectures we've had this semester have kind of focused on long-form journalism, journalism in the public interest, the things that magazines do that win a lot of awards and that get a lot of attention. Sid has really spent a lot of his career in what's known as service journalism, which is really the meat and potatoes of almost all magazine journalism. It's what pays the bills, and it's what brings the readers in. People come looking for guidance about their lives and looking for information that they can use to navigate the world. And Sid is a real master at this. Not only, if you look back, and I won't go through the whole of his resume, although as I just said to him, he's worked at more magazines with ampersands in the title than any other person I can think of. Before Southern Living, he was at Field and Stream. He was at, if I get the order right, Gardens and Guns. Garden and Gun. I got the order right, but not the numerals. He was at Men's Journal before that. And the constant in his career is that every magazine he's gone to has won multiple national magazine awards, gotten multiple nominations, and that every magazine he's gone to has grown, and often grown exponentially. And those are two of the hallmarks of great editors. It means his peers have looked at what he's done and considered it the highest expression of what can be done with a magazine, and readers have looked at what he's done and said, we want that. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Sid and hear some of his reflections on what he does and how he does it. Sid Evans.
Thanks, Eric. It's such a great privilege to be here in this hallowed space. I'm a huge fan of Victor Navasky, and yours too, Eric. So it's a real honor to be here. I'm guessing this is all the Southerners on campus. Is that fair to say? No? All right, well, so how many of you guys are readers of Southern Living? Okay, we've got a few, that's good. And how many of you are familiar with Southern Living? All right, but not everybody. All right, well, listen, what I thought I would do for a minute is just give you a little snapshot of Southern Living magazine and the brand and the business. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about service journalism and how that is kind of the building blocks of the magazine. And then I'll sit down and we'll have a little conversation. So Southern Living was founded in 1966. So we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. It's been a big celebration for us. We grew out of another magazine called Progressive Farmer, which was the biggest farming magazine in the country. Enormously successful, had been around for about 80 years at that point. And, but things were changing in the South. All of the people who lived on farms were moving into the cities and the suburbs, I mean, by the millions. So Progressive Farmer was starting to struggle. They were struggling with readers, with advertisers, and they said, we've got to do something about this. They launched a section in the magazine called Southern Living, which was intended to speak to people who were interested in cooking and more domestic things, and to appeal to some of these people in the suburbs, and it was a hit. So they launched Southern Living in 1966. It was an enormous success. They did not come out of the gate knowing exactly what they were doing or how they were doing it. This is an early story that they ran about Thanksgiving in space. You know, it was like the late '60s. Everybody was crazed about all things space, and there were a lot more funny things that they did back in the day that didn't quite work. But a lot of what they did work, and they had a formula that was basically built on 4 kind of pillars: food, home, travel, and garden. That was their that was what they covered. And within 10 years, it was one of the most profitable magazines in the country. And today we have an audience of about 20 million. We have 2.8 million subscribers, about 15 million in audience for the print magazine, and about 5 to 6 million for the website. So it's a very big mass magazine. It's also very concentrated. It's concentrated in the South, and this is a map of where where all these readers are. And when you take that huge circulation and you put it on top of this kind of region, you have something very intense, and it's almost like, you know, house to house and door to door. I mean, you go into, you know, almost any house in the South, and you're likely to see a copy of Southern Living on the coffee table. So that really gives the brand a lot of power and strength. We have a lot of licensing deals, a lot of brand extensions. I won't go into detail about any of this, but I mean, there's a plant collection, and there's a designer network, and a hotel collection, and we have a bunch of products with Dillard's, which is a retail store in the South. So it's a very big brand, and I actually have to get involved in a lot of this stuff. It's not really what I signed up for as a journalism career, but I get dragged into it, like it or not. We do bookazines. We do about 14 of these bookazines a year. And these are, you know, single topic. They are $12.99. They're expensive. There's no advertising in them, but it's a very successful business for us. And we publish books. We do about 6 to 8 books a year. A lot of those are cookbooks, but we also did a coffee table book this year around the 50th anniversary, which was, you know, a beautiful book. There was some great writing in there, and beautiful photography. And then we did this collection of Rick Bragg stories that was a New York Times bestseller. So I wanted to just speak to service journalism for a second, and what this magazine is really founded on, and what I've worked on in my career. I'm guessing that a lot of you guys you're not hearing about this kind of journalism at these lectures, and perhaps not that much in class. But it's an interesting career. And I have loved it, and it has given me access to a lot of really interesting people. I've loved the journalism, and it's also kind of a support structure for great writing as well. You know, this whole thing really was kind of, this was a new kind of magazine back in the 60s, and there was another magazine that was founded 2 years after Southern Living was launched, and that was New York Magazine. It was founded in 1968 by a guy named Clay Felker. And Clay Felker is really seen as kind of the godfather of this kind of journalism. I mean, it was a radical idea. And he was you look at like BuzzFeed now, and it's all lists. And, you know, people didn't used to do lists like this. And Clay really understood that there was a way to do that in New York Magazine, and to make it fun and sexy, and to rank things, and to make it compelling. And, you know, to this day, that is the part of the DNA of New York Magazine. And I think Adam Moss is by far one of the most talented editors in the city, and he is a genius when it comes to a great list, when it comes to writing about real estate, when it comes to writing about restaurants. You really can trust what they're doing in New York Magazine. So, this is a great tradition. There are interesting people doing this kind of work. I think about editors like Dorothy Kalins, who launched Saveur and Metropolitan Home and did phenomenal work at those magazines. David Granger at Esquire. Esquire is known for its long-form journalism, and they've done phenomenal things over the history of that brand. But they also do great service, and David was brilliant at that. And I was sorry to see him leave Esquire not too long ago. But he could do a story about shirts or cars or food, and really make it so interesting and compelling, and exciting even. And it also it gave him a connection with his audience that was very immediate, very practical, and it was stuff that they could really use and apply to their lives. So I wanted to just spin through a few kind of rules of this kind of journalism, and then I'll talk to Eric. But looking at some things that we do at Southern Living, number one, and that's why I put this cake story up there, is to be inspiring, and to inspire people to take action. You want them to open up a great service magazine, and Martha Stewart is all about this, right? You want them to open up that magazine and just go, oh, look at that. I want to do that. And that's what we were trying to achieve with this, this story. And when I get an email like this from a reader who actually made all 6 of these cakes, and God knows how long it took her, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I want them to take that information and, go into the kitchen and use it, and they really get something out of it. Number 2, the list. The list is just such a bedrock of this kind of journalism. And you look at lists in magazines. Not everybody does it well, but there's a real art to it. And this guy who writes our barbecue column, and any of you who know the South, we take our barbecue seriously. So when I was looking for a barbecue columnist, I hired a guy who has a PhD in English literature, and he's a great writer, and he also has a kind of a PhD in barbecue, although I don't think they have one of those yet. But he goes to these places, he vets them, he knows what he's talking about, he does his research, and he digs into this with all of the vigor that any journalist would dig into a big, meaty public service kind of story. He really does. So I think that's really important. I wanted to speak to the art for a second, just the art of these magazines and trying to really grab them with great headlines and great type. There's a lot of planning that goes into this. When we do a tomato story, you can't just shoot tomatoes anytime. You got to shoot tomatoes in season. So, we shot this a year ago, and I think, you see the result. You see something that's very fresh and powerful and bright, and the type is so important, and the way that the type works with the images, and getting the headline right, and getting the deck right, getting the captions right, all that. I think a sense of humor and voice is really critical, and this is maybe one of the hardest things to do. This is a column that we have called The Grumpy Gardener, and he is actually quite grumpy. But Grumpy has this wonderful voice, and he also, he knows what he's talking about. He knows his subject inside and out. But he's got this great voice that comes through that makes it incredibly entertaining. And he says it's easy to keep dogs from digging up your flowers. Get rid of one or the other. And people love that, and they really are drawn to it. And he's got kind of a rabid following. This is a road trip story, and I put this in here just because it's so important to get it right. And when you're telling people, I like to think of these stories as, somebody emailing me and asking for advice, and it's like a friend. And, I'm telling them where to go, and it better be good, and it better be right, because they're taking their vacation, they're taking time off from work, this is meaningful time to them, and you've got to tell them stuff that really is, that's going to be great. So there's a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of fact-checking and a lot of reporting that goes into this. And these are moving targets as well, because places open and close, and so we've got to make sure that we get it right, and that's critical. All right, I put this embarrassing picture of me making biscuits in here because I wanted to just speak to, in the same way that barbecue is important to us, biscuits are maybe even more important. And when we do a biscuit recipe, it's got to be right, and it's got to be authoritative, and it's got to be definitive. So this is a recipe that went through dozens of variations to arrive at just the right recipe, just the right steps that anybody could follow, and that we could basically guarantee that they're gonna get a good result. And by the way, you freeze the butter, and then you grate the frozen butter so it mixes into the flour. Anyway, I'm just saying it works. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just surprise. I think, the element of surprise, this is true for all magazines, but especially for visual ones. This was our 50th anniversary issue, and we had 4 covers. And, for our readers to get this, we wanted this to feel like a celebration. We wanted it to feel like a real party, like we were really throwing a party, and we did. And they weren't expecting 4 covers, and it didn't look anything like any covers that we had ever done. Well, there was a white cake, I guess. I guess I can't really say that, but all together, it sort of told a story, and it surprised them. So I think that's a real weapon in your pocket if you're trying to engage with people and really and speak to them. So I guess I'll stop there, and we can chat.
Good.
Sound good? All right.
So do you actually know how many white cakes have appeared in total on all of the covers of Southern Living historically?
So I know that we've done I think we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of our white cake, so it has not been around forever, but we did one, 19 years ago, and it was an accidental stroke of genius because it blew the doors off of anything. We had never seen anything like it. The brand hadn't. I wasn't there, but it sold like 40% more than anything had ever done.
Wow.
So obviously, when that works, you do it again. Right. And now we've done them 19 years in a row, and it's still working.
Does it still outperform
Yes.
other covers?
By far.
And do you have a theory as to why?
I don't know. It's become like a thing. It's become like people talk about it, and they look forward to it, and they want to make it, and I don't know. It's just something that we kind of own. Nobody else does it.
Right.
At least nobody's known for it. So I don't know. It's a little mysterious to me, but I almost don't even want to talk about it because I don't want to mess with it.
We've talked a lot over the semester with all of the folks who have come for the lectures about digital and magazine journalism in the digital age, but especially in service journalism, where so much is available online. where you can tell quickly if it's up to date or not, is this place still open or not, all the kinds of things you struggle with when you're coming up with something that's not going to be out for a while and then is going to be out for a while and you can't change it. Why do Southern Living magazine anymore when so many of the things that you do, travel, recipes, a lot of the key elements of your brand are probably as big or much bigger online?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think, first of all, speaking to the biscuit, for example, if you go and Google biscuit recipe, you know how many results you get? You get 10 million biscuit recipes. So now I have a theory that 9 million of those are really bad, if not 9.9 million. So, I do think that that quality can cut through the noise digitally, and we've seen that, and we've had success with that. And of course, the way that shows up is search, and you have something that ranks really well and performs well, and that makes a real difference. But I also think that information is not organized very well on the web. It's still difficult to, yes, you can find everything, but if you're planning a road trip and you want to take a road trip like this one that we ran about Florida, you could find all those places, but it's not going to be organized for you, and it's not all going to be at your fingertips in the same way. So I think there's still some advantages that print has over digital. And I think there's still advantages to brand authority that matters.
Well, let me just push a little deeper on that, and it's because it's something I think about and something the profession and the industry is grappling with. The things that you just cited could all be done digital only. So excellence, authority. You could still do all those things on a website and say, we're the place to come to figure all those things out, and we'll organize it for you in a way that works. So what is it that you can do here, in print still, that makes it worth putting this out all the time in so many different iterations, as opposed to just having a digital publication?
Well, if everybody walked away from the print magazine tomorrow, then that would kind of answer that would be an answer in itself. But they still see a lot of value because it's still a robust circulation that still makes a lot of money and performs very well. And I don't know the answer. I don't know how long that persists, but there are people who still love the kind of sense of discovery and the ease of a print magazine. It's a very easy thing to operate. It doesn't require any knowledge of apps or websites, or you don't have to know where to go. Once you get it, it's all right there for you, and it's delivered to you in a timely way, and I think people still value that. Not everybody, but there are a lot of people that still do. So, I don't know that we've quite figured out how to replicate that on the web. Mm-hmm. Even a great newsletter that comes to you and has a lot of great content that's been curated for you will send you off to different places. So, the experience of it, I don't think quite matches the ease of what you get in print. Mm-hmm.
So the demographics of the South has changed dramatically in the 50 years that Southern Living has been around, and probably more dramatically than any other region in the United States. It's the beginning of that 50 years, the South had a very clear regional identity that made it very distinctive from the rest of the country. And to some extent that, I wouldn't say it's been eroded or diluted, but the fact that there's been a demographic influx as well as an outflux, has really changed the region and changed the degree to which it's distinctive. How does that affect you, the publication, and you as an editor in terms of how you think about who you're reaching and what you're doing with the brand?
It makes it very exciting because we're covering a South that is changing rapidly. So that as a journalist is so energizing, and it's a goal of mine, if not my top goal, to really have the magazine reflect the modern South and reflect the changes that are going on, and capture some of that energy. We did a story in the anniversary issue about Houston, which is a great example. The food scene in Houston, and I haven't actually been, so I'm basing all of this on my writers and reporters and people that really know. But the food scene there is just off the charts, and it is becoming an international destination for foodies, which was not the case. I mean, we did the story in the anniversary issue. I mean, in the launch issue about Houston in 1966, and it was about the space, all the space stuff that was going on there, and there was a lot of building happening. But you look at where it is today, and it's just it's such an exciting and interesting place, and that's just one example.
Right. Talk a little bit about race, because that's obviously a big demographic shift in the South since the magazine was founded. And the magazine, when it was founded, had a little bit of a antebellum air about it, in the sense that the values and the culture that it aspired to represent was steeped in a certain kind of Southern history. So that demographic has changed a lot. How do you bring the brand sort of into the modern era and take account of that?
I mean, the goal of the magazine has always been to cover the best of the South and to seek that out wherever it may be. I've tried to be really aggressive about that, and when it comes to race, trying to make sure that it is as diverse in our pages as it is in the South, and to really bring that into Southern living. When it was founded back in 1966, there was so much going on, and they made first of all, it came out of a farming publication. And they made a decision that this was only going to talk about nice things about the South that were happening. They weren't going to cover anything political, and they weren't going to be driven by the news or by any. And you look at the old issues, and you would think that nothing was happening. I mean, that there was nothing going on. All the turmoil that was happening. So they just didn't cover it, and they stuck to. They said we're going to be about the home. We're going to do recipes. We're going to do decorating tips, and we're going to do nice travel stories.
Right. And then can you give us an example of how that you've taken that history of the magazine and sort of tried to be attuned to the changes? Is there an example of something, a package you did or stories you did or the way you approached something that sort of, you mentioned you did something on Charleston, I think.
Well, that's kind of that is kind of an outlier, and something that we don't do very often. So obviously a horrible event on so many levels. And my wife and I were actually in Charleston on vacation when that happened. We were there with our kids. and we got the news. And we had lived in Charleston for about 4 years, so we have very close ties to the city. And it's a very small community in a lot of ways. There are horrible things that happen all the time that we don't cover. But in that case, I came back to the magazine, and I thought that that was something that we just needed to talk about. And in particular, the way that city came together in the wake of those horrible events. And the fact that you had 20,000 people standing across the Ravenel Bridge of all races, kind of holding hands through that. That was such a powerful moment that I felt like that was something that we needed to address. And so I wrote a piece about it myself, and it was a last-minute thing. We had 24 hours to pull a story, and it's not something that we do very often, but in that case, I felt it was the right thing to do.
I want to invite people to come on up if you have questions, and I'll ask another one while you formulate yours. Come on up to the mic. You showed the dinner in outer space, or whatever meal that was in outer space. It's always easy to look back and sort of laugh at the choices people made at the time. So can you give us an example of something you did that you think probably won't withstand the test of time?
God.
Or that you, even at the time, looked at afterwards and thought, yeah, we did that, we didn't really pull that off?
Wow, that's an interesting question. No, everything I've done has been pretty much perfect. I can't think of anything.
The editor of the outer space thing was probably holding that up as a great example at the time. So.
Oh, boy. I don't know. Something will occur to me. I mean, look, in the job that I'm in, all I see is mistakes. I mean, it's hard for me to really ever be happy with an issue. I lay awake at night thinking about this caption or that headline or that lead, or maybe I should have done this differently. And and sometimes when the magazine comes out, and it hits my desk, I just like, I can't look at it, So, I can't think of anything particularly heinous.
Well, you're also, I think, I forget who it was. We had someone earlier in this semester, very celebrated editor, who said something similar, said basically all I'm thinking about is how I'm probably screwing this up.
Yeah.
But there's also the gap when you're the editor between until it goes to the printer, it's always potential. It's all potential. It's all has the chance to be perfect. And then after it goes, it's only what it is. And that's always going to be so far short of whatever you hoped and dreamed that it might be.
Yeah.
And it's the gap between those two things that's, I think, hardest to confront after the fact.
It is.
So.
But there is something beautiful about a print magazine that has to do with deadlines. And you have a very hard and real deadline, and it's going to the printer, and there's nothing else you can do about it. You've got your slot, and that's it. And it forces a kind of creativity. It forces a kind of surge of creativity. And I think the best editors and writers too do their best work when they are on deadline. And deadlines online are not so rigorously enforced. There's a lot more flexibility. So, I think in a way I need a deadline. I appreciate a deadline.
That reminds me, and I'll share it just before opening up for questions. Someone told me at a story at a magazine recently that a writer had turned in their story the day the magazine was supposed to go to press, and the managing editor who was responsible for getting the magazine out was pulling her hair out. And the night before, the writer was still writing the story, and he was walking out the door at about 7 o'clock. And the managing editor said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Oh, I've got tickets to Hamilton." and went to Hamilton and didn't turn the story in until the next morning. So the best writers embrace the deadline, but some just ignore it. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
Sure.
So I'm actually originally from North Carolina. So when you were talking about biscuits and barbecue, I was excited inside.
Where in
I-
North Carolina?
Chapel Hill.
Oh, great.
I
Yeah,
lived in Chapel Hill, and then before that, Greenville.
great.
So yeah, we're really into our barbecue. So for the 50th anniversary, you had 4 different covers. I was a little confused. Did you pick one cover to go with, or?
So we
you
had
used-
4, I should have explained this perhaps more clearly. We had 4 consecutive covers. So they were 4 one after the other.
I see.
And the one on the left was and this is a little wrinkle in the story too. So the one on the left was the front cover on the newsstand. And I did that because it was white cake. And I wanted it to sell, and I knew that it would, but I did the band, the Preservation All Jazz Band, on the cover of the subscriber version, which the subscribers loved. But the other interesting thing was there were some people who liked the table, and they had ripped off all the other covers and had just the table cover, and and that was their favorite. And they sent us pictures. So anyway, it was really fun and funny to see how they reacted.
So just to be clear, it's one cover after the other. There were like
Yeah.
4 covers on the magazine.
Exactly,
Right.
4 consecutive covers, yeah, that you could turn through, yeah.
Okay, very creative. And then I had one other question.
Yeah.
If it's okay. So for every issue, what is the process like for choosing what themes you're gonna include in the magazine? And just like, I mean, obviously for Mother's Day, that's, an event that comes up before other, home decor, desserts. How do we
do the
Yeah.
lineup and everything? So first of all, you're speaking about the print magazine, and we're creating content all the time. We are basically we're like a daily newspaper. We are not only that, but we're like a TV station. We're creating video. We're doing, we have about 30 Facebook posts a day. We're posting on Instagram. We're posting on Pinterest, Twitter, everything. The print magazine is planned very far out. It sort of starts with a pitch meeting where we'll say, okay, we're going to be talking about the May issue, and we'll have a pitch meeting with all the editors, and they come, and it's really fun. It's actually one of my favorite things that we do, and they all pitch their ideas. We kind of capture them all, and then we narrow them all down to the ones that the senior editors will get together, narrow them down to the ones that we want to go with. And a lot of times we're doing this like a year in advance. So for a strawberry story, you want to shoot the strawberries while they're in season. So we'll do that story a year in advance. And then there's kind of another piece of it that is all the much more timely stories. So the travel stories and things like that tend to be done closer to the deadline. And we kind of mash that all together. We assign the stories. We assign it out to the writers, or we go and write it ourselves. We assign it to the photographers, bring it all in, package it up, ship it out the door.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Just before we go to the next question, just stay on this for a moment. Were there any other alternatives you considered to these that sort of didn't make the cut, or did you always sort of know those were the 4 concepts you were trying to execute?
We knew generally what we were doing. This was quite a production. We threw a party at a barn outside of Birmingham. That's a barn in Alabama. And that 50 that is lit up was a sign that we had made in Nashville, and it was about 6.5 feet tall. And we dragged it up into the top of that barn. And we had this big gathering, and we knew that we wanted to do the cake and the barn and the band. The last one was a spur-of-the-moment thing that we did with sparklers, where we lined up some of our staff and had them spell that out with sparklers. So that was kind of a spur-of-the-minute thing.
It's funny because I just assumed that was photoshopped or in some way, digitally enhanced.
You're so cynical.
Yeah, I just, it's hard to believe in anything anymore. Yeah.
So for starters, that deadline versus Hamilton thing, I think I probably would have taken Hamilton also. Just because it's Hamilton. So actually, my grandma left a cookbook with me recently, and she actually said that she thought that you guys had actually copied a lot of her recipes from her. So I'm just
Really?
I'm just kidding. She would like to think that, of course. She's been an avid fan of the publication for a long time. But the question that I had for you, actually, you've worked with a lot of publications that kind of fall under the same umbrella with the identities of the South. And I wanted to ask you, of all the ones that you've worked with, from Garden and Gun and also with Coastal Living, is there one that resonates the most deeply with you? Like, is there one that represents your version of the South more than the others? Or is there kind of like a mixture of all these publications that fits your, or not your vision, but your version of what the South is?
That's an interesting question. I worked for a little less than 4 years at Garden and Gun, which is based in Charleston. I was there in the very early days of the magazine. It's a very different magazine from Southern Living, and it's more of it's 50-50 kind of male-female audience, so that makes it very different. And the guy in me likes the guy stuff. So I do, I loved that magazine, and I still do. And my very good friend is the editor now. The other ones, Field and Stream and Sports Afield, I was at these hunting and fishing magazines. And I loved that. That was something that I grew up doing. So I knew it, and I had a passion for it. And I love that aspect of the South as well. But I also love the writing. And I haven't talked about this much, but I think, one of the great pleasures of working on magazines like these is getting to work with some phenomenal writers who have their own passions. They want to write about things that they love, and sometimes you get great journalists to do it. I like Phil Caputo, who won a Pulitzer Prize and wrote A Rumor of War, and phenomenal journalist, and wrote great stories for us at Field and Stream. Because he wanted to go to Alaska and fish, and he came back with these incredible stories. And Jim Harrison, who did terrific essays for us, and that's something that I love bringing into all of these magazines. I think it's a layer that it's part of that surprise factor. It's kind of the thing that ties it all together, and I just enjoy it, and I think the readers do too. But if you want to do wall-to-wall stories like that, then you're going to have a really small circulation.
So that was actually my follow-up question to that. Do you have any way of tracking with your demographic who is subscribing to more than one publication under that umbrella? Like, do you have repeat offenders, or do you find that each of those demographics are fairly contained?
So I work at Time Inc. Southern Living is owned by Time Inc., and we are very serious about demos and about research and about circulation, and trying to really pinpoint, everything that you can know about your audience. So yes, we do know that. There is some overlap between Southern Living and Cooking Light and Coastal Living, but it's minimal. It's not significant. But, Cooking Light grew out of the pages of Southern Living in the same way that Southern grew out of the pages of Progressive Farmer. So, but we do look at that closely. Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you so much for the magazine. I'm going to really enjoy this when I get home.
Good.
I'm a Texan and very familiar with your magazine, and so totally enjoy it every time I'm home, and that's 2 or 3 times a year. But my question is, what is the selection process for articles? Are they, basically, are you familiar with Fredericksburg, Texas?
Vaguely. I mean,
Okay.
I know it by name, but I have not been
I'm
there.
going to be presenting a paper for the Country Schools of America Association.
Yeah.
And it's very academic, but it's an excellent idea for the home section. And I'm wondering if I could take it out of its academic and put it in something more casual. Would that be something of interest?
Sure. What's your pitch?
Well, I'm looking at African American quilts.
Oh.
Oh, and I have I've located some of the first that was out there because I had to dig deep to get the information. And the whole process of quilting, and actually from cotton, when I saw the farm tractors up there at the beginning slide, the conference is on the theme is on the land, learning with a hand. So I threw a proposal out to look at cotton,
Yeah.
and one of the outgrowths of cotton is quilting.
I mean, I'd be really interested in that. I would, no kidding, because I think it's, this whole sort of movement of Southern-made things, which has just exploded, and it's so, there's so many stories there.
I have some good ones.
My
And
wife and I were at a thing this past weekend in Montgomery, Alabama, that was a Southern-made kind of festival, and it was just incredible. And she's here, by the way. But it was just incredible, all the different things that were there, and it's our
I'll
readers are
talk to you
interested.
after.
Our readers are interested in it, so yes.
Okay, but one other thing about the plants, that part of it. Growing up in Texas, we are on the land. So one of the things that I do in New York every year is I attend the Macy's Flower Show. So I invite people to go with me, and the first thing we walked in with all of these flowers from all over the world, and I said, not one bluebonnet. And she said, there's a story for you. Okay, so that's my other story. I thought, how can they not have any bluebonnets at the Macy's Flower Show? And then I thought, okay, this is a clear sign that I'm ready to go back to Texas because I'm looking for bluebonnets in New York.
Well, maybe
and
that's
not going to happen.
maybe there's something there for the grumpy gardener to explore. But we'll talk after.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, and come on up if anybody has a question. People have a lot of passion about the various areas you write about. Is there, whether it's gardening or biscuits or barbecue, is there one that rises above all others in terms of contentiousness that you expect a flood of letters over no matter what you say? Is there kind of what's the third rail of Southern living?
Food is by far the most, I mean, that's our bread and butter, so to speak, and it's the thing that also inspires the most passion. And when you get it wrong, you really hear about it. But if there's a third rail, it might be alcohol. Because there are, believe it or not, there are still quite a few people in the South who do not like alcohol in general, and they don't like it in their food. But there are a lot of interesting recipes that use vodka. And,
So
you know,
rum cake is the
yeah,
third
so,
rail of.
you know, so
okay.
I know when I run that, I'm going to hear about it, but, you know, sometimes you got to do it anyway.
All right, so prohibition hasn't quite, there's still wet counties and dry counties, so we've still got that to contend with. This is all fascinating. We could keep going. I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you're thinking of that we haven't touched on, anything kind of thought you want to leave folks with?
Well, I think that one thing I would speak to is I think, you know, we are, as we move further and further into this digital era, you know, there's a real challenge to maintain the quality that is so critical to who we are and everything that I'm talking about. And I think it's true of any kind of journalism. You know, the level of effort and detail and perfection that we put into our recipes and into every travel story, everything that we do is really difficult to maintain at the volume that we need to produce to be competitive. You know, we have a pretty small team, especially given the amount of stuff that we are putting out, and we're all doing video. We're doing Facebook Live segments. We're posting on every social platform. And, you know, we need to produce lots and lots of content. And it's hard to do that and maintain the quality. And that's, you know, I think that's a conversation that's happening really across the industry. So it's, you know, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sid. That's a great place to end tonight. It's also a great place to end the lecture series that we've had going all semester, because really excellence is just sort of table stakes. You got to start there. Everything else stems from that, and it's really good to be reminded of that. So thanks for taking the time.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Thank you guys for coming. I didn't bring a computer, did I? No. It looks just like mine.
Oh, yeah. No idea.